Okay, so we're recording. As I always say, we're not live, but you are being filmed or recorded. So if you speak up, your voice will be on my infamous YouTube channel. And if you step in here, your face and your body and whatnot will also be on YouTube with me.
Praise God.
There you go. Catechumen Kyle, everybody. So, this is the fourth and final of these lectures. I can't believe we're already here. Of course, as I said, this was going to be next week, but then because of the funeral, we moved it to tonight. So because of that, I didn't have as much time. I thought I was going to have about 6 or 7 more days. Yeah, that's right. I said it, 6, 7. To work on this, but instead, I think I capped it. Each one has, it's been covering a longer time span. You remember the first one was like 1 century, then it was like, longer and longer. This is 2 centuries right here, so I think that's a good cap. Even though my meticulousness and my OCD wanted more, I think this is good. There are some things I'm not as sharp on just due to needing to hurry this up, so hopefully other history experts such as Father David will chime in and inform me when I need it. Okay, so can anyone tell me, because I'm old and tired, like what we've been talking about? So I'll give you one thing. I talked about the development of the major patriarchates and liturgical rites of the church, and I got this map not to scale, okay? I do have a condition called dysgraphia, so this is dysgraphia. But about the councils, what was going on at the councils? Can someone summarize the first 2 councils for me? Nicaea and Constantinople, what were they dealing with? Yes, the Trinity, thank you. The Trinity is... I did, because no one else is speaking up. The Trinity is 3 persons and 3 hypostases. This was very important. So this was defining the Trinity. Then Ephesus and Chalcedon, Christology, sort of what I gave my sermon on this evening, right? The Annunciation, God becomes man, Jesus Christ specifically. We condemned the 2 extremes, right? The one that have a sharp distinction in Christ, but also that cancel or swallow up one of the natures in Christ. And unfortunately, those resulted in schisms that still persist to this day. Right? The churches that did not accept Ephesus exist in various forms today. There's the Assyrian Church of the East, there's the Ancient Church of the East, and they both of their leaders actually are from Chicago and live in America. And everyone's favorite TikTok guy, Mari Emanuel, you've heard of him. He came out of that tradition too. He is not Orthodox, he maybe calls himself Assyrian Orthodox. This is a serious issue. But liturgically, he's pretty solid. And he even uses icons, because the Nestorians stopped using icons, and we're going to cover that tonight. And then the next 2 councils, Constantinople 2 and 3, very complicated, so I'll just do it for you. It basically did cleanup work, right? Variations of Nestorianism, kind of proto-Nestorians who died in good standing. We were like, well, you're going to be condemned too. And then... also other variations of monophysitism, such as monoenergism, monothelitism, which were forcing a false union between the 2 factions. So all these people were condemned or in schism, and then the caliphate forms, Islam, and they take over this whole section here. So our most holy, glorious Christian Roman Empire is pretty much reduced down to this. And then the Axumite kingdom still stands strong for right now. So.
Just invite Morris to come in, didn't you? Was standing there.
Oh, okay. Sound good? Is everyone up to speed? If you weren't here, or if you were here, great. Mm-hmm. So, first on the agenda, I mentioned a council that the Armenian and Syriac churches have. Now, if you remember, I should draw this. Because of Chalcedon, or people not accepting it, rather, Alexandria is split between the Coptic. Maybe I should stand on this side. Oh. This guy was telling me to stand here. I was like, no, I'm standing there. And it worked out better to stand over here. So, because of this, we have I want to use green maybe. We have the Coptic and the Greek patriarchates of Alexandria. So the Greek are the ones that accept Chalcedon. And then we have the Syriac and Greek patriarchates of Antioch. Axum, also known as Ethiopia, they follow the Coptic thing and not accepting Chalcedon, as well as Armenia. Georgia was on the fence, but then Georgia decided to become Chalcedonian, and and then of course the Persian church, they didn't even accept Ephesus, and so that is kind of like the fractures that exist. Now, I also made mention that a group known as the Maronites that were in Lebanon, they broke off after the 6th council because of the heresy of monothelitism, and that's the only real schism that came out of that particular situation. So I make mention of this council between the Armenians and the Syriacs because, as I mentioned, they are kind of gathering in historic territory of their sister churches. This experience that we all have now of overlapping jurisdictions, the non-Chalcedonians were doing first, right? The Syriacs also entered Egypt in the early 8th century, and the Armenians and Syriacs are finding themselves aligned and in full communion, but also trying to resolve issues that arise within their own ranks. And so I'm showing this to demonstrate that they are still meeting in council just like we are, okay? Because life continues even after all this. One of the main issues is the Armenians use unleavened bread. The Syriacs didn't like it, but at the end of this council they said, we still don't like it, but we're going to accept it because there's bigger things we have to worry about and things of that nature. So, nature. Get it? Because the schism was over the nature of Christ. Okay, great. So, in our Roman Empire, Emperor Leo III, he forbids veneration of icons in 730. Now, this is done subtly at first. He doesn't ban icons, period. He just says don't venerate them. Don't kiss them, don't bow in front of them. But like you can have them. But then slowly in major areas of shrines and things, he's moving icons away out of sight where they cannot be reached, right? Where people can't actually touch them. And then their official banishment comes in 754, Constantine V, which is his son, I think. So he actually is the one who publicly says, no icons, they're bad, yes?
Did they claim to have some sort of theological backing for...
Yes, they did, in fact.
Removing icons?
So there was some natural events, like earthquakes, volcanoes that were occurring, and they thought this is punishment for using icons. And like most things you and I speak about, that sounds ridiculous to us, but it made sense to them. They also are basically saying that it is Nestorian and it's monophysite to have icons, because which nature are you showing?
Are you depicting?
If it's just the human Christ, then you're a Nestorian, and if it's just the divine Christ, you're a monophysite. And actually, the grandfather, Father Les, has a great article about statues that's also connected to iconography, and he points out the irony is most of these emperors, even though they're in the Chalcedonian church, they think very much like a monophysite. Because really, if you take Nestorianism and monophysitism to their logical conclusions, you get rid of iconography. That's why to this day, the Nestorian churches don't have them, because they are Nestorians, and therefore the whole importance of iconography gets lost when you don't have a full incarnation in that way. And that's why in my bald ecumenism, as people like to say, I demonstrate that the Oriental Orthodox, who are the non-Chalcedonians, they are obviously not monophysites because they still have icons. And they also wrote in defense of icons when it affected them, right? But true monophysites and Nestorians would actually be against iconography. So it's ironic that the iconoclasts, which means icon smashers, were the ones that were like, this is both at the same time. You can't do this.
So, iconostasis is, what's the definition of that word?
It means a wall of icons, and that became a very big thing in the Byzantine Rite, especially after iconoclasm. Prior to that, Byzantine churches actually had a similar setup to what you see here. It wasn't a rood screen per se, it was more like a templon. If you look at the older schemes of Hagia Sophia, it's like a box. Like the altar is like boxed in, and there's icons down here where the icons are here at your parish, and then there's space to kind of see. So after iconoclasm, everyone's like, let's just do all the icons. So it was a glorious time of like revitalizing the church. When we get there, though, we're not even there. We're in the initial banishment.
I'll let you get back to
yes,
the main.
sir. Then 2 years later, the Papal States are established. So the Papal States, Father David, would it be fair to say that the modern Vatican is the successor to what we knew as the Papal States? It's the last vestige. I like that. Okay, so the papal states were because, remember Arianism? Remember that heresy that was still around? It finally dies out in the early 8th century. Yay, killed all the Arians, or well, converted them. But because of this, land that Arians owned, and sometimes they stole from the canonical church, were being returned. And so the Pope of Rome was like, oh cool, let's make some states out of the stuff. So it became its own kind of sovereign nation, almost. I don't know, was it a kingdom, an empire? What would you say, Father? Well,
Yeah, so the coup is in the 20s, the papal states.
Yes.
The Pope is the Protestants.
perfect. So that's important because if you remember, the western part of the Roman Empire falls in the 5th century, and Rome itself is still part of the Roman Empire, but it's no longer the seat, right? The capital is Constantinople, and pretty much the rest of the West, that's all north and around it, they fall to various Aryan tribes. There were so many, right, that I couldn't even list them all. And their borders are shifting, and they're mostly Aryans. So they're either pagan or they're Aryan. But now they're all part of the Orthodox Catholic Church, more or less. And so as we reclaim the West, or the Western lands, the papal states are established.
So just to clarify, in your last talk, we had discussed how the Muslims had gone north from Africa to
Spain and Portugal.
Right?
Yes, so they're still
there.
Yeah, so they're a threat, and they're still there, and they're trying to take over the West. So the papal states also kind of build a stronger buffer against that.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Then over on the far east, because remember last time we had the final split with the Persian church, the Patriarchate of Antioch, or the Greek Patriarchate of Antioch, ours, starts what's called the Catholicate of Romagiris for all of the Persian Christians that want to accept Ephesus and Chalcedon and etc. And scholars are actually torn on this, how Persian or Byzantine these people were. It was probably a mix, I would guess. People that were coming from here, would probably keep the Byzantine right. But remember, Georgia, at least the part of Georgia that's under the Caliphate, they do the Assyrian or the Persian right. And Georgia actually helped charter this Catholicate because they're obviously a little closer to historic Persia in that sense, or Iran. And so it was probably both, and this Catholicate stretches from like modern day Iran all the way to what we call Uzbekistan. So that's actually pretty wide territory during a time where it was like very unsafe to travel that far, so that's quite impressive. But the caliphate in those areas seemed to favor the Nestorians, just like the Iranians did. Even though the Iranians was Zoroastrian, they never became any kind of Christian. They favored the Nestorians, largely to be against the Romans, right? And so even though the caliphate runs this whole gambit, they sort of respect the Nestorians as the locals, but they allow the Greeks or the Byzantines to have their own setup out here as well. So as the Roman Empire is suffering from iconoclasm, there's a council that is attempted in 786 at the Church of the Holy Apostles in Constantinople, and word gets out, and the iconoclasts actually break the council up. So this could have been the 7th Ecumenical Council, but they got word, and they said, no way, Jose, and done. So then, impressively, just a year later, they secretly were able to plan what now became the 7th Ecumenical Council, by the Empress Irene. So usually it's emperors that are convoking these, but in this case, the Empress herself was the one in charge of it, which is a way they could keep it secret better, because I'm pretty sure her husband was an iconoclast. So she was like, I gotta keep this secret from him, and we gonna make this happen.
Oh, she went behind his back.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. I mean, what do you do when your husband is a heretic, right? It's crazy, So it's a whole thing. And so 258 hierarchs are there, which is pretty impressive for a secret meeting, plus 50 representatives. So obviously the main thing it does, it anathematizes iconoclasm. There's a whole bunch of other things that they deal with, but the part we all care about is it anathematizes iconoclasm. And it defines words. So icons and saints and anything that are not God, and to modern ears this sounds terrible, but any linguist, anyone that knows history knows this is correct. They are due proskinesis, and that is actually the word for worship, because worship in the traditional English means to give something worth. Anyone know what a judge is called in the United Kingdom?
Your worship.
Your worship.
Oh,
And no, they don't think that they are God. It's the same here, that they're called your honor. So to worship is really just to bow in reverence of something and to give it worth. So that is literally what we do. We worship saints and icons. Take that. Now what we don't do is adore them. That's the Latin word, but the Greek word is latria. That is due to God alone. And the word idolatry means to give an idol the kind of honor only due to God. That's what it literally means. Idolatria, idolatry. Okay? So I know we get more traction if someone says, "Do you worship this and that?" And we say, "No, that's the normie thing to say." But the actual truth that I'm going to display here is that we actually, traditionally speaking, we do worship these things, but we don't adore them. So if you're confused, all you got to do is switch the definitions in your head, and your life will be so much better in church, but worse in society. Sorry, that's just how it goes, because we live in a society. Now, after this, we have Charlemagne, right? He's the big bad boogeyman for a lot of people. They think he ruined the whole West. Obviously, these things are always more complicated than that. Christmas Day, 800, he's crowned as Emperor of the Romans. A controversial move, because the Roman Empire is still around. So, like, what's he doing, right? How is this possible? He does it, and is he Carolingian or is he Frankish? He's one of those. If you read Father John Romanides, you'll think that the Carolingians and the Franks are the most evil people in the world who can never achieve salvation, which means every single one of us in this room, except for maybe you, cannot go to heaven because we are all of this stock, right? We can't. So
he was a Frank, but if you think about it, Carolingian is from Charlemagne. So he starts the Carolingian.
Oh, let's go. That's right. Yes, because they do call it the Carolingian Empire or dynasty. But they called themselves the Romans, right? Because although it did get broken up into 3 Frankish kingdoms at one point, a little after this. Yes, that actually makes total sense. Well, guess what? 15 years after this, Leo V, he forbids icon veneration again, doing the same kind of thing, moving icons away so they can't, they're out of reach, and things like that. It's very interesting to preach on iconoclasm while a lot of our icons are veiled. So I think that's really funny. Obviously the context is different, why we veil the icons in the Western Rite leading up to Holy Week, but somebody could walk in here and be like, "Oh, what's going on?" But obviously there's other icons that are not veiled, so we are not iconoclasts.
Because we can't reach them. We haven't got enough veils.
Oh, we can't reach them. That's interesting.
we don't have enough veils to veil.
And then, while this is going on, the Caliphate in 827 takes Sicily. So Sicily was still part of the Roman Empire. I think there might have been like a sliver of Sicily they didn't take. I was looking at some map, and it was too much for my feeble brain. So I just said, fine, Sicily. So they take Sicily. So they're still conquering the West. This is what you were asking me about before. So they're still getting there. So if anyone, there's a lot of Roman Catholic apologists that like to say the reason they're Roman Catholic and they're not Eastern Orthodox is because all the main centers of Orthodoxy fell to some empire or various ones, but Rome never fell. Well, that is a lie. That's not true. Rome has already fallen several times, and various things connected to Rome have fallen. Everyone's fallen. Everyone's been conquered. You know who hasn't been conquered yet is Axum, Ethiopia. Now, they will be eventually. But so far, they have not. They're actually the only ones. Just saying. So, they do have the Ark, but that's kind of a separate issue. Yes.
I can just interject, I have seen, not the Ark, because you can't see the Ark, but I have seen the chapel with it.
What was it like?
Oh, it's brilliant. I mean, you can't see it. I mean, it's just to think the Ark is there. So, I was very impressed. Sorry, I was just interjecting.
No, I love that. I welcome that.
only one monk guards it with his life.
He does, and he's blind, so you can't see it. This is the most amazing.
Wow,
Because nobody can look on it and live.
that's crazy.
I mean, so when
Yeah.
we're getting too far. When he
Yeah,
dies,
yeah,
do they
it's really
replace
annoying.
him? Right?
Yes, and I have often wondered, do they blind the monks specially? I don't think they just find it. No, they don't. I
Just checking my time. Oh, okay.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah.
Well, there's not hardly enough monks, and then to find a blind monk on
Oh,
top of
yeah,
that.
in Ethiopia there's plenty of monks.
Oh, is there?
Okay, so I might need more space on this section. Again, this is not to scale, and I have a disability or something, so probably several. You know what? I'm not going to draw this out. You just have to use your imagination, right? Everything they say, Orthodox don't use their imagination. Well, we're going to right now. So, Great Moravia Empire is founded in 833. We don't hear about this as much. And this is basically like Western Slavic area, okay? So pretty much all of Czechia and Slovakia, like we call them now, plus parts of Hungary, Austria, Poland, Ukraine, Romania, and Serbia. Okay, so this is an empire. A lot of it is former Roman lands that, fell because various reasons. And so this empire is founded, and it's officially pagan for now. So the pagans are still lingering around here. In 843, we then have a council in Constantinople that reaffirms the 787 decision, right? Because they're going through iconoclasm. So that's a long time. Yeah. Both periods of iconoclasm are like surprisingly, you're just like, wow, it's a long time to like go around and be told like you can't touch or kiss, or as some translations of the council say, salute an icon, right? I love that. They are to be saluted. Yes, what I don't even, yeah. So one thing that is crucial to point out, we know in the Byzantine Rite, there's that epic first Sunday in Lent, the Sunday of Orthodoxy, is actually celebrating this. It's not actually celebrating the Seventh Ecumenical Council. It's obviously connected because it's reaffirming it, saying this is the law of the land, but really it's actually 843 that's being celebrated. And that long thing that's read, like if you do the full gambit like I've done sometimes, like with the anathemas and stuff like that, I thought you were filming me, and I was like, no, I've got it, I got it.
Looking at the
Okay,
email.
good, yeah, good. I was just like, oh, wow, okay, now I'm reading on both sides here, They have a whole thing with like anathemas and stuff. I thought that was standard because my first Sunday of Orthodoxy, I was at a church that did that, and I was like upset that they weren't read subsequently. But all of that is from this council. So it's interesting, this is not an ecumenical council, but it affirms the decision of that council. And this is probably more or less where the 787 council, known as Nicaea II, is officially declared an ecumenical council. And it completely slipped my mind. That's also super important that it's in Nicaea, where the first council was, right? They kind of did that on purpose. But if you remember, Chalcedon at first was going to be held in Nicaea as well, but then it ended up being held in Chalcedon, right? So it's not the first time they've tried to meet again in Nicaea, but this was that they were successful. Now, 861. Constantinople, I believe the patriarch already is Photius the Great, who's going to play in here in a little bit. He has a council with Armenians and Syriacs, and they come to an agreement of Christology and everything, the whole bit. And then nothing happens. Nothing at all. It's remembered fondly in the Armenian list of councils. They actually list this as a council that they, not as like ecumenical, but that they like accept and they validate. But for some reason, it never, we could have reunited back then. Now, I have theories as to why we didn't, whether you want to hear them or not, I'm going to tell you. Part of it is, it's Constantinople and just the Armenians and the Syriacs. So we have the Coptic and Ethiopian churches here who were like not involved. So the message would have to go to them and say, hey, we've reunited with the Chalcedonians. So who knows if they would have approved it or not. And also, clearly the Syriac church, because it claims the throne of Antioch, would have to go back under Antioch and this whole thing. So I think the biggest issue was that not all the churches on both sides were involved in the conversation. It was just one of our patriarchates and then two of their local churches. So what could have been? However, the following year, the Armenian monarchy is restored. Remember, the Iranians got rid of that 4 centuries ago. So they're back in business, baby. And they are recognized as a vassal state between the Caliphate and the Roman Empire. And they eventually grow to become their own dynasty. So the Armenians like reclaim their imperial throne, as it were. And then the following year, Constantine and Michael, who are more famously known as Cyril and Methodius, which was actually their name much later, begin evangelizing the Moravians. What if I want to walk over here now? What is? So a lot of people call them the apostles to the Slavs, which is true, but they mostly were in the Moravian Empire. I don't think they ever actually went into the Bulgarian Empire, which were the ones that started attacking after the 6th century. However, Saint Boris the First, right, the Khan, right, which is what they called their emperors, or you know what the Iranians and the Persians would call a Shah, right? He hears about the work of Cyril and Methodius, evangelizing and creating the Slavonic language, which takes all these different languages done by the Slavic peoples for church use. And he says, I like this idea. If we become Christian, we can do this, and I can, you know, have greater unity with my people. Because the Bulgarian Empire was overlapping with what we now know as Bulgaria, also some of Romania, Macedonia, Serbia, Kosovo, Moldova, and even parts of Albania and Greece. So these are like the 2 main Slavic empires, if you will, right? The Moravians in the west and the Bulgarians in the east. And so Boris the Based, he says, let's do this. So he's brought in, I think, through Constantinople. So I don't think he ever meets Cyril and Methodius, though. But he hears about their work and he's inspired. And then they adopt Christianity as their state religion. And so while missionaries are in Moravia and Bulgaria, they're sort of kind of dicing it up, like what patriarchy are you under? Are you under Rome or Constantinople, right? And Cyril and Methodius are basically what Father Demetrios at St. Augustine says is biracial, okay? They serve the Latin rite and they serve the Constantinopolitan rite, okay? And you would think it'd be as simple as, hey, this area that's closer, maybe if they do the Western or the Latin rite, they should be under Rome. The ones that are doing, you know, the Byzantine or the Constantinopolitan rite, they should be under Constantinople. But we know life is never this simple. And so Photius the Great, he denounces the Latin missionaries for using the F word, filioque, okay? And this is a problem. And he has a whole thing called the Mystagogy of the Holy Spirit. I recommend everyone read it because it is the truth of our faith, okay? And the filioque actually was started in, was it Toledo, Spain, Father? Yeah, in the 6th century, I want to say. So I didn't even mention it before just because I had so much else to talk about. But it starts locally, and they say it's to combat a semi-Arian heresy to kind of promote the divinity of our Lord, but I think it unintentionally also kind of downgrades the spirit. We're all Orthodox or are going to be Orthodox, so we all agree with this. And this creates controversy. Now, Photius also has other critiques of what's going on with the missionaries, but the filioque is the main thing. So, for example, he's not a huge fan of the fact that, like the Armenians, the West has started to use unleavened bread. He says it's Judaizing, but he doesn't think that's a divisive issue. He's just like, I don't like this. I don't want it done in my locale. But he's like, but the filioque has to go. Like, it never should have been. It has to go. So we have what we consider a robber council, Constantinople IV. Well, we don't call it that, but it is known as that by the Roman Catholic Church. So it is convoked by Emperor Basil with a measly 12 bishops at the Hagia Sophia, and it condemns Photius. It says he was never a bishop because St. Photius was a layman. He was a student. He was a brilliant man. Zero desire to enter the clergy, and he was selected to be the Patriarch of Constantinople. And it's interesting because the Roman Church, when they write about him, well, I think now scholars are being more honest, but historically they wrote scathing things about him, like he was power hungry and he wanted to rule the throne and everything. It's like, if you read his letters, he wants no such thing. He's like, I just wanted to stay in school. I wanted to read my books. I didn't want to deal with any of this. So
how did he get put in a position of power without being in the clergy at all?
He was just so humble.
Like, who voted him? Was it a democratic vote?
We don't do
Did it
democracy
install
and
him?
orthodoxy. Everything has to be unanimous. So remember at the Second Ecumenical Council, Saint Gregory steps down and they elect this dude Nectarios, who's like, I don't know, like a cop or something, right? Or like the equivalent of one back then, and they make him the Archbishop of Constantinople. So this does happen, and like Saint Ambrose of Milan, he was a catechumen when he was elected as the Bishop of Milan, and it is said that babies were saying his name. Imagine baby's first word is Ambrose, like, who should be our new bishop? And it's like, Ambrose. You're like, oh, okay. So this actually is not uncommon. I feel like if this were to happen now, we would all be very scandalized. But
Yeah.
great saints of the church did this exact thing. They were lay people, sometimes catechumens, and then kind of sped through and then made very high-ranking bishops.
Saint Spiridon.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, historically, it's not uncommon.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
for this to happen.
Cool.
Catechumens should not get ideas.
Yeah. So don't be, well, yeah, so Kyle, he'll be Archbishop Moses. Just kidding. And the same year this council ends, 870, the Bulgarian Empire says, we are going to be under Constantinople. They don't like how Rome is acting and doing stuff, so they said, we are going to commit to being under Constantinople. Okay. Then there's another Constantinople IV. Now, there are some, because what do we often hear? We have 7 ecumenical councils, right? Some people in our church claim this is the 8th ecumenical council. In fact, I saw some scathing arguments on Facebook today that I probably didn't need to be reading, but I'm like, oh, that's interesting about this. So I was even asked at the Pan-Orthodox Vespers by someone, how many ecumenical councils do you think there are? I was like, why ask me this? Oh wait, no, he might have asked me that because he knew about this talk, sorry. That's not that mysterious. Yeah. So this obviously declares that previous Constantinople IV as invalid, and it condemns the Filioque, and it grants Bulgaria autonomy. It says you're your own empire. So autonomy is sort of, as I've talked about the last 3 lectures about these major churches that are rising, we don't have the concept of autocephaly and autonomy like in plain words yet. It's kind of like a default or a de facto thing. So for example, did anyone notice Cappadocia's gone, right? They were the fount of the Armenian and the Georgian churches. I didn't even write them on the board this time because they are not as high ranking as they were before due to various things. There's an Armenian presence there, so they sort of get swallowed up by the church that they started, okay? And these things happen all the time. So Bulgaria is formally and officially granted autonomy, which means they're still under Constantinople, but they're locally kind of self-ruling. Constantinople is not going to interfere in a lot of what they do, send some chrism over or something and things like that. Some of the Bulgarian hierarchs will be on the Synod of Constantinople. That's what autonomy is. And autocephaly is when you're just completely, your head is your head. That's autocephalous, right? Self-headed is what that word literally means. So then after this happens, Moravia, they decide to be under Rome. Okay, in 885, they make that decision. And that kind of makes sense. Even to this day, most of historically what was Moravia has mostly, Latin or Roman Catholics there, and then the Eastern Slavs are, known for their Eastern Orthodoxy. So even though they were still in full communion back then, that's sort of when those rites and those ecclesiastical lines were set, was there in the 9th century. And then, I jump ahead real fast because, like I said, I had to kind of hurry this up. 927, the Bulgarian Patriarchate is given autocephaly. Now, this is huge because this is the first time in history that a national church basically is being made, right? Before, Rome, Antioch, Alexandria, even Jerusalem was when it was elevated. They're not national churches. They're major cities with the surrounding territory. But this is the first time that pretty much based on a ethnic lines, if I can say that, if I can be so bold, is why a church is granted governance like this. We do see after the Council of Chalcedon, of course, like the Armenians kind of become this way automatically by not accepting Chalcedon and things like that, and the non-Chalcedonian churches do become very set in their culture because they preserved the ancient liturgical rites, while the local Chalcedonians obviously adopted the Greek or the Byzantine rite. So we see a little bit of that with them, but with us in our church, this is the first time we really see the development of what we now call national churches. And that's it. I mean, there's plenty more I could say, but questions, comments, critiques, predictions of the future.
So we've made it all the way up until the year
927.
927,
Yeah.
approximately. And I know we're not going to dive into stuff that happens next, but kind of generally speaking, where do we go from here when we're studying this sort of content?
I wanted to end this with the baptism of Kievan Rus in 988, which I guess I now am by stating it. But because Father David and I went to St. Vladimir Seminary, and that's big because that's where what we now know as the Russian Orthodox Church comes out of. So maybe if I do another series like for Advent or something, I'll start there. But yeah, at this point, the tension between Rome and Constantinople is at a high because of the controversies with the Slavic lands and peoples, and also with this Fourth Council of Constantinople thing. So I see it claimed, but I haven't seen the paperwork myself, and maybe Father David has. But there are people who say that the Church of Rome considered our Constantinople IV, the one that vindicates Photius and condemns the Filioque, that Rome considered that to be the Eighth Ecumenical Council for a time, and then later changed their mind and said that the previous one that condemned Photius, that supported the Filioque, is actually their Eighth Ecumenical Council. And to this day, the Roman Church, that is what they consider to be the Eighth Ecumenical Council, because they claim that there are 21 now, right? Do you have any insight on that?
No, I think it's a very murky and difficult piece to find the sources and everything. So I think scholars are confused, and legitimately confused.
Yeah, yeah. And there's people that say that there's even 9 or up to 10 ecumenical councils, but those 9th and 10th, they occur like later in our timeline here. So I prefer not to approach those. But in terms of whether there's an 8th, even in the 19th century, I'm pretty sure, there's an encyclical from all the main patriarchates that actually state 8 ecumenical councils. But then there's others before that say that there's only 7. So it never officially was ratified as an ecumenical council, right? It's become a pious opinion, perhaps we could say. But in the Byzantine hymnography, it's set at 7. Okay. What's funny though, it at one point was set for 6, and okay, 6, 7, great. Chill out, guys. But there is a feast day in the Byzantine Rite of the first 6 ecumenical councils, and then later they added the 7th. So they kind of already codified 6 before they accepted 7. And so 6, 7 just writes itself, everybody.
There you go.
That's it.
Every
Boom.
time.
End. No. So what makes a council ecumenical then, right? Because, for example, as we said, I guess two lectures ago, a very kind of snot-nosed response to non-Chalcedonians is, well, even if you aren't heretics, you still refused an ecumenical council. Well, the council they held after Chalcedon was at least just as big as it, if not maybe slightly larger. Okay, so the numbers game doesn't work when we want to play that. What do you call the majority of the church in that case? Clearly, as Orthodox, we would agree with all of this. We venerate Photius the Great as a saint. We don't say the Filioque. I tell people when people ask me, "Oh, you're in the Western Rite. Do you say the Filioque?" I'm like, "No, we don't say the F word in church, right? That's what I always say because we don't believe in it." So, what makes it ecumenical, right? Nobody would question, I would hope, the teaching of this council. But whether it's ecumenical or not, I guess it remains to be seen what makes an ecumenical council. And even with that whole thing in Crete that we were talking about, there were people already declaring it an ecumenical council before it happened. I'm like, that's not how it works, guys. Of course, it was lay people on the internet. They can never be corrected about anything, okay? But it was a wild time. Like, I was in seminary at the time, and I'm watching all this unfold. I had classmates that were there, and So,
What is the technical definition of ecumenical?
well, ecumeni means the known world, right? Like more or less, yes? I think so.
So what I want to say is, I think it's Eusebius in Nicaea II Constantine. He's the first person who speaks about an ecumenical council.
Okay.
When he convokes, he's talking about Congregation of Nicaea, one of course. And he says this is an ecumenical council. So what does that mean? This is my theory, which you can accept or reject if you like. My theory is that this means imperial. So the oikumene is not just the inhabited world, but it's the imperial world. This, I think in Luke 2, isn't it? Caesar Augustus sent out the decree that all the world should be taxed. And the word there is the word is oikumene, the same word, which really means the empire. So my own view is that the ecumenical councils are imperial councils. And that's really what makes them ecumenical. And when people say, we could have ecumenical councils now, I don't think we can. As I always like to say, the last ecumenical council, who was the last emperor? Who was the last emperor? Oh, you know this, my captains will know this. Who was the last
His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie the Great.
Exactly right.
Oh wait,
And
like actually?
yes,
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
he was.
I said that to be funny, but you're serious.
And what did he do? He convoked a council.
He did. He convoked a council of all the Oriental Orthodox churches. I used to troll my anti-non-Chalcedonian friends like that was the last ecumenical council.
So my own view is an ecumenical council. We can't have any more ecumenical councils because there's no more emperors. I think we might say we could have general councils, but my own view is ecumenical means imperial, and having no more emperors, we can't have any more ecumenical councils. But we can have general councils. We could have general councils.
And there's this. Oh, go ahead.
I have maybe a controversial question.
Oh, pardon me. Ask him. He's the one who asked.
Yeah. I'm only
He comes
going
to
to hint him if I get stuck.
So when we talk about throughout the series of these lectures, the relation between clergy and political leadership, right? And the emperor, empress, or whoever is in power, convening these councils and these sorts of things. Is it ironically better that we don't have that dynamic anymore because now it can be completely clerical and we don't have as much political influence coming into something like that as you would if it was convened by a political leader?
Man, I am instructed by Father David not to talk about politics with
Oh,
parishioners.
What about politics from 1,000 years ago?
Well, really,
But I will. Well, but because I was gonna say, I think I can safely state this without getting too specific. I don't think we're beyond the political influence.
Oh, I mean, no doubt, it's still.
Yeah, I'll just say that.
One thing that was advantageous in the day when you had the emperor, who was also a holy ordained being,
Right.
is that as in his secular role or her secular role, they could enforce things like end of Arianism. That's one disadvantage we have today.
Well, I guess that's the other side of the coin.
But that
right?
took a while, though,
Is
too.
if
Yeah.
you're like, all right, everyone, we're getting together, and people are like, no, I don't feel like it. If you're the emperor, you can be like, actually, you do feel like it.
Sure. Well, and also look, the same emperor that convoked the council that declared the previous invalid, right? It was the same emperor at both. So sometimes the emperors don't even have an opinion per se. Obviously, some of them do, but others are just like, I just want everyone to get along. I want the schisms to stop. I want people to stop fighting. I want a united empire. So we see this. I mean, same thing with I'm drawing a blank now, but there's been the same emperor who convoked Ephesus I also convoked Ephesus II, which we consider a robber synod, but the non-Chalcedonians accept, not as ecumenical, but they accepted its validity, at least for a time. Same emperor was at both. So sometimes the emperors aren't as invested. They just have the power to move things along.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, if an emperor isn't personally, interested per se, it's still potentially advantageous to them because it helps keep the empire calm and everyone, is friends.
Right, exactly. And that's why with the Moravians, there were different emperors or shahs or whatever that were talking with the church about, okay, what happens if I do accept this? And I think there were even Moravian emperors that they themselves converted, but they actually didn't make it the state religion of their empire. It's interesting that the Bulgarians were like jumping on it, like let's do this. But with the Moravians, it wasn't that quick. It was more like, all right, maybe I'll accept it, but we'll see. Because sometimes, especially when you deal with, I mean, a lot of these people that were coming from the pagan world were very fierce. You know, like we live in a time where like we are like rightfully scandalized by like violence and things like that. But like, I mean, how much violence have I talked to you guys about with these 4 lectures? That's pretty normative.
Yeah.
I even mentioned something like today to somebody because I was at the Greek church in Boulder this morning, and people were surprised when I'm just like casually talking about these things in history, and they're like, "What? It was like so violent?" I'm like, "Yeah, bro. It was like it was pretty violent." So violence has just been the norm. In fact, if anything, I think most of us live less violently than a lot of our ancestors did. I mean, obviously we know like some people are ready to go, you know, if there's a need, right? But in terms of like the amount of violence you will face on a daily basis just by like existing is far, far less than probably most of history, really. You know, we see a lot of violence on TV and flashing across our screens, so we think the world is so violent. Well, the world has always been violent. I'm not saying it's good. It's obviously a product of the fallen world, you know, but it's always been that way. So when I was a fresh convert, you know, like 13 plus years ago, I really wanted there to be an empire again. I would pine for it. Even my first year in seminary, I was at the inter-seminary retreat was being held at St. Tikhon's in Pennsylvania, and there was a priest there who has since reposed. I'm drawing a blank on his name, but he basically was saying that the majority of missionary work historically, especially within the Orthodox Church, has been done by emperors. And he says, so what does that tell you? And I immediately piped in and said, we need to restore the empire. And everyone laughed. And he said, I didn't consider that. And I was like, wait, really? You like honestly didn't consider that? It's like I get that it may not be feasible, but that never dawned on you that might be a solution. Yeah, so I'm not sure. I mean, I think that, you know, the idea of a Christian empire is good because it's a way that we can enforce, well, and now I'm thinking of like several caveats to this, but
Yeah,
basically it's a way to enforce our values without being hypocrites. I do feel like in like the 2-party system we have in America, we have to compromise in some way. No matter who you vote for, there is compromise. And that's just the way it is. And even in a multi-party system too, unless we make like an Orthodox party or something, which will be the monarchist party, obviously. And then once we win, we're gonna stay, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, there are ways to infiltrate, but I'm not sure. And I don't even know if it would work now. We live in a very anti-imperial world. Even a lot of the royalty that are still alive, like a lot of their power is nominal. So what do you do in a world that has resisted empires and kingdoms, and then you have them go back to it? I don't know that
The
would...
next emperor will be the Antichrist.
Oh boy, yeah, there you go. That's predictions. Remember, I did ask for predictions.
It's very important to say, you know, we sometimes have a kind of romantic view of Orthodox emperors, or you know. But the fact of the matter is, half the heretics, you know, people who push heresy, were emperors. So you know, you have good emperors, you have holy emperors, but you also have a lot of heretical emperors. Metropolitan Saba has spoken about this, so just for his sake, I will say, he points out that our Antiochian church has for a very long time not lived in symphonia between the secular power and the church, because we've been under the dominion of the Muslims. And he actually thinks it is quite a good idea that we should be free from secular control. And I am inclining to that. I go up and down on this. Throughout my life, I've gone up and down on that. But now I'm inclining very much to the idea that we cannot found a Christian society, just simply because of the fallenness of our nature. What we need to do, since Seraphim says, inquire the Holy Spirit and thousands around you will be converted. We are not going to impose, I think you speak about, you know, what we can do if we had a Christian empire. But what we have to do is convert ourselves. This is the thing. We have to convert ourselves, and that is the way we will convert the world. So anyway, I'm sorry to go on about that. I am the rector there. So
No, you are the rector. I'm merely the
I
lector.
do think that is the thought of his Netherlands as well, that we in the Anglican Church do not have a tradition of symphonia, which is the working together of state and church.
And I'm going to tackle my opinion too. I agree with Father because I think, right, in principle, it sounds appealing, right? I think every one of us wakes up, every day and goes, yeah, if everyone could just have, orthodox values, like life would be so much better for us and for everyone else, right? In practice, I think it never works that way. And just as the grass could be greener, right, it could also, be on fire on the other side too.
Absolutely.
If we end up with, to your point, Father, one of these people who, isn't actually, operating in our best interest. And, perhaps what we think is our best interest will differ person to person and church to church as well, so.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
What happened?
We're on low power mode, but should we?
Oh, that's fine.
Should we?
Yeah, we might stop there. If you want to ask Stephen hard questions, ask him hard questions off the camera. But thank you. Oh, let's give him a round of applause.
Oh, wow. Yeah.